we have verses 1 through 6 and 17 through 40. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. Her brother Lazarus was ill. So the sisters sent a message to Jesus, "Lord, he whom you love is ill." But when Jesus heard it, he said, "This illness does not lead to death. Rather, it is for God's glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Accordingly, though Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, after having heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been there, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher is here and is calling for you." And when she heard it, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The neighbors who were with her in the house consoling her saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and those who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So they said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upwards and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go."
Would you please be with me in prayer? O God, our rock in ages past, our hope for ages to come, speak to us all this day, and may the words of my mouth and meditations of all our hearts accept our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Amen. I love the story of Lazarus. I know I probably say that about a lot of stories in the Bible, and you might think that this is just something I say when I don't really know how to open up the sermon. But I'm serious. I really do love this story of Lazarus. I love it because it shows a paradoxical way that makes sense to me as a person. Jesus is powerful in this story. He raises Lazarus from the dead. And Jesus seems somewhat powerless. He weeps. He experiences the fullness of what it means to be human, to live with radical hope that seems to border on being delusional even, while at the same time living in the grief and disappointment that we all experience. The story of Lazarus shows Jesus in that complicated place, capable of transcending the limitations of the world, limitless power, and yet deeply connected to people who live in that world, to people who are fragile. Jesus doesn't seem bothered by this apparent contradiction, though. He seems perfectly at home in this really difficult space of weeping for his beloved friend Lazarus and the many people who are grieving for Lazarus, and simultaneously holding out a radical hope for Lazarus' life, even after 4 days in the tomb. Of course, this story has a happy ending. Lazarus comes out of the tomb, all wrapped up in his bandages, and Jesus tells the people to unbind him. Lazarus lives. Oh, we put things down. Okay. Give me just a moment here. I'm gonna unmute myself on Zoom. Can everybody on Zoom hear me now? Yes, okay, so you're getting the sound through my laptop. This is a little bit wonky, but that's all right. I'll catch you up. I was saying I love this story of Lazarus and that I say that all the time, but I actually mean it. I love this story. And I love it because we see Jesus in a very human place, to have seemingly limitless power and yet also unable to get it together and do something about it. We see Jesus living with what would seem like delusional hope for Lazarus, even as he is in the tomb, and we see Jesus weeping. Now, this story in the gospel is a turning point in John's gospel. A few verses later in the narrative, we hear that after this, the people decided that they had had enough. They are going to put Jesus to death. This, raising Lazarus from the dead, restoring a beloved brother and friend and community member to life, this is what they decide is the final straw. Traditionally, the resurrection of Lazarus was seen as prefiguring a much grander event. Now, the name of it sounds scary, but trust me, it's really beautiful. It's called the harrowing of hell. You've heard of harrowing tales, stories that scare you or chill you to the core. The harrowing of hell refers to Christ's descent into Hades, the underworld. Orthodox theology held that between Jesus' death on the cross on Good Friday and the resurrection on Easter morning, Jesus was busy down in the underworld. Jesus went there to harrow, which can mean either to pillage or plunder, or to break up the soil. Either casts a pretty fascinating image. In Orthodox icons and depictions of the resurrection, Jesus is shown either reaching into the belly of a great beast or leading a multitude of people marching out of the gates of the underworld. This might seem grim and archaic, but there's something really powerful there too. Christ's resurrection, eventual resurrection, is not just about one individual. It's not a single act that happens. It is, in fact, the salvation, the recovery of all people, of all creation even. What happens on the cross is not about one person who dies and overcomes death. It is about God's plan for everything that is to be restored, to come forth into new life. I love that image of everything that has ever died or been lost. My grandfather, the dinosaurs, dodo birds, Pompeii, living on in some new way, being called into the light of Christ to live again. I don't know what this would look like. I really can't imagine it. But the idea that everything continues to exist and live in Christ fills me with a radical sense of hope. It's what keeps me getting out of bed every day. But what I love more than anything about this particular story is that Jesus waits 2 days before he goes to Lazarus. It's not exactly clear in the text why Jesus waits. Is he, as the text implies, waiting for Lazarus to die so that the miracle can be accomplished? Maybe. Is he thinking that perhaps everyone is overreacting to what is probably just a serious stomach bug? He might be. Or, and this is my favorite reading, is Jesus actually completely frozen because he's not sure how to respond? Does he respond like the human being who was a friend to Lazarus and Mary and Martha? Does he respond like the Son of God, the powerful one that he is? I like to imagine that Jesus is faced with this difficult scenario, the potential death of a beloved friend, and he just sort of freezes. He isn't sure what to do, and by the time he heads over there, it's too late. I can relate to that. Like many of you, I've been sitting with the recent report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The report, authored and reviewed by some of the leading climate scientists in the world, tells us once again that climate change is moving much faster than we thought. The report tells us and estimates that the next few years are going to be absolutely crucial. According to this report, if every government on the planet agreed and followed through on a radical plan to reduce emissions by 50% by 2030 and completely eliminate them by 2050, we would have about a 50% chance of averting the tipping point, when the average global temperature is increased by 1.5 degrees Celsius over pre-industrial levels. Once we go beyond that, the predictions get pretty dire. And even if we stick to the loftiest goals we've dared put down on paper, the chances of meeting those goals are slim. I'm going to say something right now that might upset some of you. Some of you might not want to hear this. I don't want to hear it or say it. I'm going to say something that I've said before, and I believe it's true, but it's not going to make it any easier to hear. It is too late. Like Jesus, who waited a couple of days before going to his sick friend Lazarus, unsure of what to do, we have spent decades collectively wringing our hands and playing politics with the issue of climate change, with some offering doomsday predictions and others brushing it off as hysteria. All the while, we've made what we were told was incremental progress, developed new industries making green products, and purchased hybrid and electric vehicles. We paid more attention to recycling
been more thoughtful about the things we buy, and guess what? It wasn't enough. Last year was the highest greenhouse gas producing year on record. And our self-professed climate president has just green-lighted a project that will open pristine Arctic tundra up to fossil fuel drilling. It is too late to avoid the worst. The only question at this point is how far back we will have to move the goalposts. How much chaos and destruction will we have to endure and witness? Already, the United Nations High Commission on Refugees estimates that 20 million people leave their homes every year because of climate change. That number will continue to swell. Already, species are being lost at a rapid rate. Forests are being destroyed. Rivers are being squeezed down to mere trickles. Church, it's too late to avoid the worst. This is the worst. We are living in it. The planet we know, the planet many of us grew up on, the planet we hope future generations would enjoy, that particular planet is already gone. It is already in the tomb, a product of history, a casualty of the excessive greed of systems that seek corporate profit no matter the human cost. That world is already in the tomb. We should, like Mary and Martha, like Jesus himself, be weeping, because it is already too late to save that world that we have known. Some of you might be angry right now, frustrated. You might be saying, Pastor Bob, why should we bother to do anything at all if you're going to stand up here and say that it's too late? What hope do we have? And let me be clear. I do not say this to you today as a hopeless person. I say this as a person who has only hope left when I look at the climate situation. I say these really upsetting things because I am convicted that this is the only place that real hope for real change can begin. Because by insisting that it is not too late, we are sanctioning the damage that has already been done. And as long as we let that be the story we keep telling, we're going to keep making small, meaningless changes while around us the world burns. Church, this is the moment. This is the place where our Christian faith, a faith that is grounded in love and hope, must stand. This is the place where everything we have said we believe, if it is not lip service, must bear fruit. If we cannot find a way to have hope in this place, then ours is a lost cause. I'm standing here this morning and I'm pleading with you. I'm speaking to you as your pastor, and I'm speaking to you as someone who is much younger than many of you. Someone who is part of a generation that is supposed to inhabit this planet for another 40 to 60 years. I don't stand here to lecture you. I stand here today to call us to task. I believe that we, every one of us, must unequivocally acknowledge that we have failed to avert a disaster. We must acknowledge unequivocally that we have come to a place of death and destruction. We owe that to the people who are fleeing their homes because of droughts and famines and fires and floods. We owe that to the generations younger than all of us whose youth is not carefree and joyful because they can plainly see what many of us cannot, which is that it is too late. Church, as hard as we must weep and grieve and pray, we have also got to find a way to hope and to resist and to fight even harder for some kind of viable future for this planet. It will not be the one that we have all imagined, but we are the ones who must stand amidst this valley, dry bones, and somehow find the strength to envision a world where these bones live again. We are the ones who must, in the face of the stench from the tomb, imagine a joyous resurrection. Because as much as this sermon probably feels very doom and gloom, it is at its core a plea for joy. It is a plea for hope. We cannot spend every minute despairing about the planet. I have been there and tried it. It destroys you. We must fall in love with life again. We must learn to dream dreams and see visions again. We must laugh and dance and ski and swim and bask in the sun to remind ourselves just how precious these moments we get are. That is what we are fighting for. That is what we hope for ourselves and for future generations, is it not? When we begin by acknowledging that the disaster is upon us, and we commit ourselves to finding joy, peace, love, and even hope in this place, we can start to imagine a future where our children's children might be able to find the same things. Even though things may continue to get worse for a little while, and they will, we can't expect to go from worrying about the impending disaster to hope about what lies afterwards. We have to go through it. We've got to go through the valley. We've got to rest in the deep despair that this deserves. Jesus didn't shy away from that despair. He went directly to the place where he knew there would be grief, where he knew there would be weeping. That is what we must do. We must pray like it is too late, because that is what strengthens us to fight like there is still time. Because there is still time. Even in the most dire models, humanity remains on this planet for a long time. And the generations that will inhabit a different world than the one we've known will still need joy. They will still need hope. They will still need to fall in love with this place. They will need the Spirit of God to fill them up, to put flesh on their dry bones when they come to their own valleys. They will need the kind of liberation that comes with resurrection. Church, we're a long ways yet from Easter. We're a long way from living on this planet in a way that feels sustainable and just and joyful. We're a long ways from the kind of resurrection and hope and new light that we need. We are now at the deepest depths. But the story isn't over. Lazarus' story was not over. Jesus' story is not over. Our planet's story is not over. That is why we are launching our environmental ministry. We're still early on in the process, but we're committed to putting our Christian faith into action. We're committed to finding ways to live out our convictions. Even in the midst of this climate crisis, we don't give up just because it feels hopeless. We'll find ways to express our grief, our dismay, but we will also find ways to hold on to the joy, the delight, the pleasure, the things that God created and called good. Very good. Because I still believe that our children might yet live in a world in which they have hope. A world in which they know the simple joy of walking lightly on the earth. I still dream about that future even as I grieve. It is too late to avoid the disaster, but it is not too late to imagine something beyond this. It is not too late to demand a world that rises from the ashes transformed. It is not too late to laugh in the face of death and to hold fast to all that is good in this world for our sake, for our children's sake, and for the sake of all creation. So may it be, and may it be so. Amen.
Amen.
Now, Greeter, would you please rise in body and